On today's episode, we're chatting about weddings. I sit down with Lucy Myers, who's an incredible wedding planner here in Muskoka, Ontario. We talk about how she got into the industry, what her main mission, and her why she does what she does. If you don't know Lucy, you might want to jump on her Instagram and be amazed by all the beautiful, beautiful events she has created. So let's jump into this episode and chat weddings.
For sure. Yeah. I would say that my friends that have been married and had the bigger wedding, I think that some of them look back and they're like, I wouldn't do it again. And with people that I know, like clients even that have come to me for their second weddings, I find that they tend to be a little bit more low key, not any less spectacular, but just a smaller, more intimate group. I always try and stress to people that if you wouldn't invite someone to your house for a dinner, then don't invite them to your wedding because it really should be intimate. And if you don't feel comfortable having someone in your home and cooking for them, you know, if you want to be, it's kind of a crass way to think about it, but a wedding is in some ways, or the reception, anyways, the most expensive dinner party you're ever going to throw. And so if you kind of equate it to that, it helps you make those cuts. Um, I think that it is tricky when you think about, for example, family, friends of your parents that you grew up with, you remember them your whole lives. And part of you wants them to be there, and weddings and funerals are a nice time for people to come together. But unfortunately, you can't accommodate everyone based on either capacities or budget. And sometimes those people just really don't make the cut. And I think that COVID has forced people to really reconsider why they're getting married, like why the wedding is important. And I think that comes into play in terms of people that are anxious to get married to start a family. Um, and just in general, it kind of forces you to think, why is the wedding important to us? Why is it important to have a big wedding with everybody there versus a small wedding with our VIPs there?
Mhm.
And I think it's a good practice for people just to think through what their goals and motivations are. Because some people, I think, find that they will just do an elopement or an intimate wedding because they really just want to get married. That's what's most important to them. Some people, not that they don't value obviously being married, but some people want to have a big celebration where everyone can come together, and that's important to them. And it's more about reconnecting with extended family and on all of those people that have been a part of their lives.
Mhm.
So there's lots of variations of this, but I just think that in general it does force people to really think about what their motivations are, because in some cases they can still have an intimate wedding during COVID and still fulfill all those things that they consider to be the main reasons why they're getting married.
Mhm.
And some people, my friend Megan has had to postpone and is considering a second postponement, as many are. And for her, just with her fiance and her families, not even all of the family members is over 50 people because both of their parents are remarried. So all of a sudden they have step siblings and their siblings are having kids, and they have, all these additional sets of relatives that equal an entire wedding on their own. So it's harder for her to pare down, which she had already done. She was only going to have an 80-person wedding to begin with. So to get even smaller now, I mean, it's impossible given the dynamics of their family tree. But yeah, it really does make people think about what's important because they can have a small wedding and fulfill a lot of their goals, as I mentioned. But for some of them, that's not the case, and it's better to postpone. Kind of depends what your priorities are. But what I've really been loving is that you're taking these really big weddings and then you're condensing them down to smaller weddings. And for the 2020 clients, um, they might have had a 140-person wedding go down to, I don't know, a dozen people. And all of those vendor deposits that they were already committed to still exist, which for me is great because now we get to take what was, flowers for a 140-person wedding and redesign it for a 12-person wedding that's now in the tent at the cottage. The resort's been canceled, and it gives me the freedom to redesign their wedding that's super wow worthy because now we have this budget that's already been committed to, which we have to utilize. So I think that there's still an opportunity for people to have intimate weddings that are, COVID friendly, but now they get to have them, be really over the top and look really fabulous. And I guess one of the things I've always recommended to people is really only to extend your guest list to the level that you're still able to properly host your guests.
Okay.
So if you can't afford to do open bar for 150 people, as an example, and if open bar is an important element to you, then don't host 150 people or whatever it might be, right? So it gives you the, I always love the idea of being able to have a small wedding that looks stunning and just do killer food, you know,
Yeah.
even if it was a 20-person wedding and it was like a tasting menu or something under like a beautiful canopy of florals and chandeliers and just all this stuff. I think that it's an opportunity to kind of scale things back, but make it even more luxury. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a fun twist.
That's amazing. And with because you also have all of the supplies. Like you're literally there doing everything for the bride and their wedding, like all of the event stuff, but you're also there decor doing all the decor, which I think is so cool. Like your style, every time I like go on your page or anything, I'm like, oh wow, I gotta like save that, I gotta save this. I love that idea. Like where did you get all your inspiration from, or was it just over the years you just kind of gathered different ideas being at different events and ideas online? Or
That's a good question. So I don't even really know how to answer it. I don't know where everything comes from. It definitely, sorry, I have something in my eye.
no, that's all right.
Um, there's definitely a lot of inspiration that I get from seeing other people's work. I do believe that we can sort of adopt, adapt, and improve, which was my parents' business slogan back in the 90s. It's, you know, I like to see things that I think are beautiful and see how they can work for different couples. But then I always want to customize it in some way. I think everything can be improved, whether it's an improvement because it's a good idea that hasn't been taken far enough or hasn't been executed well. But then also it can be improved by making it more personal to the couple. So, yeah, like one of the things that we try and do is infuse custom details into a wedding. And the more our couples open up to us about themselves, and the more we can kind of make those customizations. But I think that I take inspiration from everywhere. Pinterest is definitely my friend and enemy.
Yes.
I love Pinterest. I would say that I'm pretty good at, like, I don't have a Snapchat. I don't have a TikTok. I'm a little bit old fashioned in those ways, but I really have to admit Pinterest is like my go-to thing. I do like Instagram as well, but
Yeah.
I don't scroll through Facebook as much as I would scroll through Pinterest because
Yeah.
I'm just a visual person, and seeing all of these inspiring images from so many different facets of life, whether it's interior design or fashion or weddings, or even, great food pictures, all of these things, um, travel for sure. I think that they all come together to inspire me for whatever the design or the collection of decor is. Um,
Now, were
yeah.
you always like, where did the whole inspiration, like even your down to like your schooling and what you were interested in when you were younger? Were you like a very organized person and always wanting to do events and planning like these crazy birthday parties or anything? Or where did that all kind of come from?
So, yeah, so my mom was a great host. So that was, I mean, she would do a Christmas party. All the hors d'oeuvres were made from scratch. She definitely, she was an artist. She had a beautiful taste. So we grew up with that influence. But my sister and I loved Martha Stewart living, like as children. It's kind of, it's kind of funny. But yeah, we really loved just entertaining, hosting, cooking. We loved crafts. We loved design in general. My sister is an art director in the film industry. So, and our parents were very creative. So we definitely sort of thrived in that environment. I actually, when my dad sold our childhood home, I was going through old boxes. We kind of got to the point where he was like, okay, you need to start storing your own stuff now. And I found notebooks with clippings out of like Martha Stewart magazines and little sketches and handwritten notes where I had like designed these little dinner parties as a child. And then I still remember when I was 16, I had a dinner party with probably like six of my high school best friends. We made Indian food. I grew up loving Indian and Thai, and we grew up in Southeast Asia, traveling in the winters. So we definitely had sort of exotic palates, I guess, considering that we grew up in Muskoka. So yeah, I remember doing like a whole dinner party when I was a teenager, and I think that it's always been with me. And then I went to school for fashion business industry, and I wanted to start open a boutique. And one of the things that I kind of realized after going to school for that was that a lot of my business ideas tended to revolve around launch parties and merchandising. So I decided to go to school for events because I wanted to be able to move back to Muskoka. I was in Toronto for probably about 10 years, the bulk of my 20s, going to school and starting a career and everything like that. But I always wanted to move back to Muskoka and have something that would allow me to live in this area.
Mhm.
So I thought that the wedding industry here was a great opportunity. I liked the idea of it being seasonal because I love to travel and I want to be a snowbird as early as I can. I don't love the snow. So, and we did grow up traveling. So for me, the idea of being able to spend winter somewhere warm and work on weddings from a laptop and then come back in the summers and execute them was really my goal. So, in terms of wedding planning, I just felt like it was the best hybrid of all the things that I loved, and that it would also provide a lifestyle that I wanted. And I recommend that to everyone. I recommend that you think about the life you want and work backwards towards the career, because life is short and there's nothing worse than getting into a career that doesn't bring you happiness because your lifestyle is, I don't know, working 12 hours a day or living somewhere you don't want to work or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So, as my friends and even my partner Matt, and even myself, even now, it's like I've been in this industry for 10 years and I'm starting to think of, new opportunities and reigniting my passions in other avenues. And really, I think at the end of the day, and I'm an entrepreneur, just like my parents. And so, um, I've had 3 businesses. And I think that it's important to really think about your lifestyle because it should always be a balance.
Yeah,
So I recommend that to everyone.
I agree. I agree with you because I feel like, well, I've had the spa for 5 years, but I've been in the industry for 7 now. And it's like, it is that kind of thing where you think about like, and we're in Muskoka too, right? So we do have our seasonal ups and downs with the way of the industry here. But I agree with you. When I have clients come in, whether they're just out of high school or they're still in high school and they don't know what the heck they want to do, I'm like, where do you want to live? That is like
Yeah.
one of the first questions I ask because if you're gonna be some like crazy astronaut or something crazy, you're not gonna live in Muskoka and do that job. Like
Yeah.
you kind of need to figure out where you want to live. But I love your idea of working backwards because I think that's really people are starting to realize that working from home right now too is being on their laptops and how they can reach their goals from working from home, but maybe having that freedom once we can travel, being able to work from our laptops from anywhere.
For sure. One of the things that you have to kind of consider is in terms of your quality of life and what you want to do. If you find a job that you absolutely adore, let's say you want to be a painter, that's a tough thing to get off the ground, especially,
Mhm.
right? So if you can live somewhere that you absolutely adore and you can pay a lower cost of living to live there, which allows you to produce your art and allows you to afford to live and do that until you grow it, that's a great opportunity. And I think with the global world that we live in, we will continue to feel less boundaries.
Mhm.
That being said, I love that I'm a Canadian and we're so lucky to be here. And I think that COVID is a great example and puts it all in perspective for us how lucky we are to have a system of government that is helping us in this situation and that we can rely on. Um, we're just lucky to be Canadian in general. We have a lot of advantages that other people don't necessarily. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. But there are lots of beautiful places in the world that we all want to explore. So
Oh, definitely.
I think sorry, go ahead.
The seasonal changes in Muskoka, like I personally love the extremes we have where it can be like it can be like plus 30 and it can be minus 30 within a 6 month span, which is like crazy to get your head wrapped around. But I think too, when you step back and travel somewhere else, it really puts home into perspective too, right?
Definitely.
You,
Definitely. I have always thought that it's important for people to leave the area, go and do school somewhere, and then come back because you're going to appreciate it so much more than you did when you were an angsty teenager and you just couldn't wait for your freedom,
Oh,
right? You're going to realize how lucky we are. I think that's why real estate is just exploding and it's becoming less and less affordable, because this is the place where people move to have a beautiful summer on the lake and to retire and have all of these great lifestyle options. And I agree with you. I love the seasonality. I think that if we had the same season throughout the year, it would just feel a bit bland. And I think that we would feel less of a sense of renewal. And I feel like the time would just sort of melt away. And
yeah.
here it's like, oh, okay, fall is coming. It really makes you aware of time passing so that we don't waste our time. But
Absolutely.
also, it's beautiful. Frankly, I'm good up until about mid-January. I feel like mid-January to mid-April could just be spent somewhere nice.
I
I
agree.
mean, I feel like November and April are kind of the armpit of the year. It's like, it's not great weather. It's not necessarily snowy. It's not fall. It's not really spring like other places get. It's just kind of rainy and slushy. There might be a blizzard. You just don't know. Like it's
Exactly.
it's
Well,
not great.
for your industry too, it's great because people can have like that winter wedding or they can have that summer wedding too. Like you can really hone in on like both extremes if they want that intimate. Like even the resorts up here, I'm always mind blown of how different they look in the winter or how different they look in the summer. And sometimes I'll look at pictures, like for example, Sherwood. I'll look at photos there and I'm like, hold on, where is this? Because the night and day difference that you also can transform those venues. But then if you throw like 2 feet of snow versus like green, luscious leaves and grass everywhere, it's amazing how different those pictures and the atmosphere you can create with that.
Oh, definitely. I will admit that we don't do a lot of winter weddings. To be honest, we don't even really get the inquiries for them.
Yeah.
I've kind of chalked that up to what I assume. I mean, I don't know. So, but I would assume that some people get married in Muskoka in the winter because it's sort of our off season in a lot of ways. And so things can be more affordable.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of hotel rates and things like that. And so I find that those people aren't necessarily looking to spend part of their wedding budget on a planner or on excessive, kind of over the top specialty decor. They're
Yeah.
tend to be a little bit more pared down, I think. Winter weddings are beautiful. I have done a handful of them. What I would say about them is that everybody pictures the photos you see of any winter wedding anywhere you look, Pinterest, a magazine, it doesn't matter. And in those photos, everyone looks stunning. It's very white and light and airy. They always have a beautiful fur wrap, all of these things. But the realities of winter here can be so far from that. It's like you could have a blizzard. Your guests or vendors might not be able to make it from wherever they're coming from. You don't always get those beautiful kind of lovely winter shots. Um, Especially because I don't know about you, but I've always found whenever you get kind of like a bluebird winter day here, it's frigid. It's
Oh,
always the coldest because you don't have that like cloud cover. And so it's just like more miserable than the dark days, I think.
yes, yeah.
But yeah, so it always gives me a little bit of anxiety where I'm kind of like, I know what she's picturing. And it might be one of those, those days in February where it's like nice and sunny and it's kind of like pretty warm for winter. That's always what people hope for. But it can
Yeah.
also be, -18, -20. It could be like loading furniture over the ice and snow. Like that all gives me anxiety. It's not my favorite type of wedding to plan.
Well, and you
There's
step
too many
outside.
unknown variables.
Yeah, and then you step outside and your face hurts. It's like, okay, why are we doing this?
Exactly. And it's like, I don't, you might have that beautiful fur and taking photos for, 5 or 10 minutes might be fine. But I mean, it's cold. And do you want your skin to be like all flushed with red because it's like been exposed? And I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Well, also the availability, like we have a ton of brides from last year and this year, kind of like your friend, how having to change and reschedule, and the availability up here is getting slim to none, trying to get venues and vendors and trying to figure out like what's available, because I feel like Muskoka has just boomed in real estate, like we were saying, as well as now the wedding industry, and it just keeps growing and more people. We are fortunate with the amount of resorts we have and people can do the private cottage weddings or at their home backyard weddings, but it's hard even for us. We're looking at our schedules into 2021 and I'm like, we only book 1 year in advance just because of not because of COVID, but just because we don't know what the heck sometimes like we might have personal things going on in the next following
Sure.
year. And so I'm looking at 2021 and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're almost completely booked every single weekend.
Yeah, it is getting busier up here, and I actually, slightly in contrast to what you were saying, I don't think that we have as many big resorts as people picture us having.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Like
true.
there's some small resorts which are nice because you can rent them out with exclusivity and you can make this whole weekend for your guests, and that's great. But if you're, depending on the size of your guest count, it can actually be where you don't fit into those resorts, and then all we have left are very large
Yeah.
resorts which are a bit more expensive. You don't have exclusivity. You're talking, just hundreds of rooms, right? And there's not very many of them. And the one thing in terms of venues is like we don't really have a lot of blank canvases here. And so a lot of those resorts, because they're appealing to a leisure market, not a wedding market, you know, or conferences which don't bring in as much decor and want things to feel warm and finished, you tend to get a lot of very dark banquet rooms that have a very group of seven kind of vibe to them, a lot of red, a
Yes.
lot of wood, those types of things. We don't have any kind of like resorts that have big white spaces or things like that that you can really transform. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to transform both, but you don't always get the blank canvas, so it can be more expensive. Um, but yeah, things have gotten crazy, and I think that COVID has basically taken 2 years, now going on to 3 years worth of business, and just shoving it all into what is a very short season anyways.
Yeah.
It's hard here because in the springtime, beyond the sort of unknown of the weather, because it can be warm and it can still be chilly, you also have all of the bugs to worry about.
Oh,
And then the fall, I mean, September is a battle. I have had weddings in mid-September where it was only 10 degrees when I left at 9 p.m. And then I've had weddings at the end of September, 2 weeks later, there were 37 degrees with the humidity and it was oppressively hot. So it's a tough season in October. Like any further than September, you just don't know what the weather will be like. Um, so it is hard up here for that reason. And then we get a lot of private cottage weddings, private property. Um, those are great because you get to build from scratch in a lot of ways. But a lot of the time, it's a situation where it's like, oh, if you just go down those 50 granite stairs to the dock, that's where we're going to have the ceremony. Well, that's nice, but who's going to carry the 150 chairs down there
yeah,
and back up?
yeah,
Like there are all of these additional logistical elements. And then because we're talking cottages, more rural properties, we're dealing with septic beds. You can't put a tent over a septic bed and stake into the ground. The liability of hitting something under there with a tent stake and flooding your lawn with sewage is so scary. Like you can't do that. So when we're talking, a lot of people say, oh, we have this big flat area of lawn. Lawn isn't a big thing at cottages up here, right? So I immediately am like, uh-huh. And is that where the septic bed is? Is that why you have this level area of lawn and it's really lush? Like we can't really put a tent there unless we water barrel it. And that's not a good look. So yeah, there's a lot of additional logistics with those private cottage weddings, which is our specialty, but it's definitely something where people don't realize how it all adds up. And if your property isn't already very well suited to hosting an event, then you don't necessarily save money by moving out of a resort and to your cottage.
mhm,
But what I would say is nice is that all of the money you spend is exactly what you want. There's nothing worse than having someone who spent, $3,000 or more to rent a venue that they don't like or that doesn't complement their wedding vision.
mhm.
And then you're kind of going like, okay, well, you want it to be a fully white wedding with gold accents. That's beautiful. What are we going to do about this red carpet in the ballroom? you know, you just spend more money covering things. They hate the chairs. You're bringing in chairs. It's just, I try to be cognizant of people's financials when I'm designing. And it's just one of those things where I just hate for people to spend money just to spend more money to cover it up. So it can be challenging up here for those reasons.
Well, and I think that's why everyone that I know that has worked with you, they said just how good you are at giving suggestions and also understanding like their vision, and you're so transparent with your mission of what you want to help them with. And I think that's a huge thing as an entrepreneur is like I'm not obviously in the same industry as you, but even when I do wedding makeup, they want this like dark smoky eye with a red lipstick. And I'm like, okay, that's not gonna like obviously you have to use your professional like experiences and be like, okay, well, let's do it this way. And they end up liking it. Right. So you probably notice the same thing, right? When you're doing events, is like they'll have this wild idea and then you kind of bring them down to reality and be like, well, maybe we should do it this way, but we'll bring in complementary ideas into
For
accent
sure.
together.
Yeah, yeah, yes. It can be a challenge for people who don't have all of the industry background that we do to understand that. And one of the things that also can be tricky is just having to educate the client. That sounds fun, but 10 years down the road, when you're explaining to someone why this won't work and this will, it can definitely just be a lot of time. So, from a Lucy Myers events perspective, we definitely have a very comprehensive service. It's not as collaborative as maybe some other planners might do it. Um, it's very much about trust, and the client has to trust in why I'm making suggestions and, why we're moving in a certain direction. So they have to love the look of the weddings that we produce. So yes, it can be a bit tricky. Even with rented gatherings, the decor rental business that I have, we moved about 2 years ago. We moved to a package model. So all of the decor is pre-styled into packages that are a little bit neutral, lots of woods, whites, grays, sort of softer, more neutral palette. And then they become customized by people's flowers, for example, lots of color options in there, right? So flowers, print work, other pieces they bring in, that really makes things more specific to that wedding. But the reason that we went for the package model was partially exactly that. Everyone would cut out all of the little details, all of the little styling pieces, the smalls, in order to reduce their budget. But then you just have this furniture with nothing to soften it and nothing to bring the details to life. And so then it doesn't look like the Pinterest photo. We never really had complaints, but for me, I want our portfolio to look great and I want the client to be really happy. So it's hard if they see our portfolio images or Pinterest images and they see this, really well styled lounge as an example, and then they try and cut a bunch of stuff out of it and then it doesn't look the same and they don't understand why. And given that it's a short season and our clients are really busy with their own careers, my job is not to teach you how to design weddings. My job is to do it for you.
Mhm.
So, from the rental business side of it, we definitely just wanted to streamline it and help make it easier for people so they can design their own wedding, but have that professional polish. And from our side, also not have to necessarily explain why each individual little piece is included. Um, it just makes the process a lot easier and a better end of product, which is really what we want, right?
Absolutely. And like you said, portfolio too. Like usually people come to you for a specific type or like a theme or like, and then you can bring in, like you said, they can bring in their own personal elements. Like when I noticed this if I'm saying it right, pampas grass. That is like, yeah, that is like a huge trend now. Like everyone's
Mhm.
loving that. I just got one
I
of my,
thought,
what's
I
that?
saw it. I love it. I know what you're going to say that pampas grass installation that Allison did for you.
Yeah.
It looks fantastic.
I'm like, can I have one in every room in my house? Like, I want this at my house. I'm not even at the shop right now because of everything going on. And I'm like, every time I walk in the door, it just makes me happy. Like, I
Yeah, it
just
makes you
love it.
smile. And
Yeah.
it makes such a big impact, right? Like, I love pampas grass as well. It's nice because it provides softness and
Yeah.
it also provides texture. And it also provides like a nice filler, which is great
Mhm.
because your alternative is greenery. And obviously, we all love greenery. We're all into all the different types of eucalyptus right now, but greenery is always going to be green. And it's, unless you go with a really springy green, which is going to be a lighter shade of green and in some cases almost limey or yellowy undertones.
Mhm.
It doesn't really matter what shade of green you pick, it's always going to be kind of like dark. So when you have weddings that want to be more monochromatic and more soft and nudie and white and maybe a hint of blush and gold, that kind of look, well, if you take all of the greenery out of every flower arrangement at that wedding, it's going to be a very expensive floral budget because you're just talking premium blooms. So, being able to have a filler that provides texture and is still in that nice, creamy, light palette, and even within pampas grass, there's so many different varieties. I've noticed that there are lots of pampas slash dried flower arrangements being sold online now that are more like preserved, right? Um, you just get a really lovely look and a lot of fullness. Whether you like the boho look or not, I think if people look beyond that and focus more on um, just the fact that it's so versatile and has such a neutral color palette, it's really great. It's exciting. I'm glad that it's um, taking off and that people are more into it.
Well, and I said to Allison too, it's great because then people can cherish that forever. Like they can have, let's say they wanted a full dry bouquet or centerpiece or something like that. They can, it's like recycling it. You can keep it, which is so nice because I think of all my friends. I feel so bad for some of my friends who've tried to keep their bouquets from their
Oh
wedding,
no,
like
I
drying
know.
them, and it's been like a complete nightmare. And they've spent all this money on their flowers, and they want to cherish them because they are so beautiful, right? And I think having these dried arrangements, I hope, knock on wood, when my time comes to get married, that that's still the theme,
Okay.
because I just think it's gorgeous. It, like you said, it brings so much texture. It warms the atmosphere too. Even for photographers, I'm sure they love it because they're able to soften the photos, or the editing style would be so much more free because they don't have those dark green
For sure.
colors coming
Well,
out.
yeah, I totally agree. I hope that this sticks around. I think it is nice. I've tried to dry like sentimental flowers before. I've had no success. Like I have tried all the tricks and honestly they always look scary and dead and dark. They don't retain their pigment at all. Um and yeah, and there's something about a dried flower arrangement that is not what we're talking about, not pampases, not preserved things that are supposed to be dry. But when you try and home dry roses and things like that, they always have a really old potpourri, dusty grandma vibe. And they look like sad and dark and almost like kind of like it's sort of depressing, really. It's supposed to be something to commemorate like this day in like your love story. And then it just looks like it's decomposing in the corner in your house and there's like a dust bunny near it.
Bring on.
So I definitely it's like so much worse. So I definitely love that these can be preserved. I think that people do need to be cognizant though of some of the things that go into it. So um, one of the things that I would say is that a new product that I've seen recently is the white ruscus. So Italian ruscus is a really beautiful emerald color. I love using it. It's very versatile and has a lot of great shapes and stuff like that. But when you bleach it, it looks beautiful, but it smells like bleach and it smells like bleach for a while. And you
Oh,
also need to consider what that does to the environment. So I would say, as much as I love the dried preserved elements, we do need to keep abreast of, what exactly are they doing to the plant to manipulate it? Because pampas grass, they're not doing anything, they're just drying it. But when you start seeing these new varieties that have started coming out of bleached plants, you know, if you have to soak something emerald green in a bleach bath until it turns like paper white and see-through, what is that doing? I don't know. But I agree. I think also the nice thing about the dried arrangements from a florist perspective would be that you have a little bit of consistency and you don't have the timeline of getting, depending if it's mixed with fresh, you wouldn't have the same timeline in terms of producing all the flowers for a wedding starting on the Wednesday. You could do it, more in advance and they could be shipped and things like that. Um, but it's nice because you have consistency. One of the things with flowers is that from speaking with the florists I work with, they tend to bring in an entire bunch of, let's say, ranunculus, and then they pick the best 3 to 5 to go in the bride's bouquet. And, the ones that are less than stellar or aren't the right shade of pink or whatever, either get wasted or hopefully they get sold in the florist shop
mhm.
um, to more of a color flexible client.
Yeah.
So anyone other than wedding, basically.
Yeah. Well, also with your industry too, you probably need to know a little bit about every single vendor or person you bring in. So even the amount of knowledge you know around flowers, and you probably surprise yourself when you're talking to clients, right? The amount of information you know about all the different people you're bringing in to make this happen.
Yes, I would say that. So I went to school for special event planning, and there was a wedding component of it, and we did design a fake wedding. I remember doing that. But in general, you don't get any hands-on spirit experience actually doing a wedding in school. And I would say that for the type of job that it is, it's definitely something where your experience is your main asset. If you haven't had a situation that you've had to deal with, then you wouldn't necessarily anticipate it for the next weddings. Um, I think the biggest thing is I really sit down and I think through every element from the guest is checking in at the hotel. Go. They're at that hotel. Okay, well, they're at the front desk of it. Do they know what time the shuttle's coming? I better have like a sign at the desk that says that. You really have to think through everything, every single step in order to see where you might have areas where something could happen.
Mhm.
But it is something where you get better at it the more you've done it, because you've just interacted with more people, more vendors, you've been in more like just different situations, and you know weddings so well that you are able to think through them from the minutia of the day, which is where little things can crop up. um, so yeah, I think that I'm a big I'm a big talker. I do my best thinking when I'm talking to another person. So I love a good sounding board for my
Yeah.
ideas. So when I am talking to people, I do find that sometimes I realize that I've just been doing this a really long time and I know things that I don't even realize I know.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so hard about learning to be a wedding planner. I think that a lot of people start by working for someone else, and that is really the key. I went to school for fashion, and then I went to school for events. And so what I learned from the fashion side of school was that if you don't have an internship, I don't know why you're going to school, because you can do intro to this and 101 that, but really until you are in the industry doing the job, you're just not going to ever learn it fully. And unless you make those contacts, it's going to be very hard for you to go into the workforce with no experience and no one that you know. And so internships, paid or unpaid, provide both of those elements. It gives you something to put on your resume, and now you have someone who you've worked with and you can learn so much more from them. So I would say that the more anyone is a wedding planner, the better that they'll get. And
Mhm.
it is kind of a hard industry to break into in that sense, unless you do take the internship route. And the internship route is also then beneficial to the person that's training you, because it obviously can make it more affordable to have you there, because really you might be a body, but you might not be bringing any expertise to the table, right?
Mhm.
So it's a nice trade-off of information, and it's less threatening, because at the end of the day, wedding planners tend to be um, small entrepreneurs, and what you know and your contacts are kind of what you have. And when you have someone come in, whether they're an employee or an intern, I've had both, um, you have to be transparent with them about all of your things, or they're not going to learn anything and you're not going to be able to pass anything off to them. But
Yeah.
then in contrast, you have to know that eventually they're also going to be a wedding planner, and they're also going to have their own business, and they're also going to use those vendors, and that's just how it goes. It's just
Oh,
the reality.
I feel like that, like, I in my industry it's the exact same thing. Like, I've reframed in my mind that I'm like a mentor when I bring people into the shop, or I'm like, I usually get a lot of girls right out of school. I prefer them right out of school so I can mold them and really, like, before they get bad habits, or just they're easier to train. They're still in the learning phase of their life. And I found that where a lot of girls I train, I don't want to limit them either. I want them to be able to go and start their own businesses or do different things within aesthetics. And I want them to know that it's okay to. I did the same thing. I worked for somebody and I went and did my own thing and became an entrepreneur. We've all done it.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to see how people flourish after like working with them. And I feel like if you're going to bring someone in for an internship or a co-op, whatever it is, you just have to be transparent with them, because it's really nice to be able to showcase what you do. And it's hard to do that if you're constantly trying to hide suppliers or finances or whatever. And what I found was that at the end of the day, my clients hire me for me. Wedding planning is not rocket science. Lots of people do it themselves, lots of people's family members help them. It's not that. It comes down to what is the personality relationship between you and the couple? What is your design aesthetic? Like, what is the working relationship like in terms of collaborative, how much time you need from your couple, all of those things. So for me, I feel like people pick me for me. And if they find another planner, whether they worked for me or interned for me or whether they have their own business and they feel they mesh with them better, great, go to them. I don't want to work for a year with someone who doesn't like me and doesn't think that my taste is compatible with their wedding. That doesn't really serve either of us. Um, so I think that people do need to be a bit more transparent and not worry so much that someone's going to steal their business. Like,
Yeah.
not for what we're doing. Like, it's so personal, right?
Yeah, and I agree. Like even our industries, like it's so crazy. Like now that we're talking, I'm the same. The more we talk things out, I'm like, oh yeah, that's an idea. Oh, that makes sense because people are coming to you because of you. It's a lot to do with our personalities, and even for my business, if I ever go to sell my business, what am I selling? A client list, really? And that client list, at the end of the day, they're coming to our establishment. Yeah, they're coming to our other staff members and myself, but realistically, the business is us, right? And
Yeah.
that's why people come to us. So, and that's something I say to people, kind of back to like where you want to be, the type of people you want to work with, even your clientele. You really got to hone in when you are an entrepreneur of like, be really dialed in on your niche. Like you were saying, like that luxury cottage, intimate, like we're going to customize it for you. Like really dialing in on that niche and being transparent with everybody. So then they know, even for recommendations, I know who I'm going to refer to what photographer, or if I know their style when it comes to florals and wedding planners and venues. I kind of have an idea when I usually talk or sit down with a friend who's getting married, but it's the the world of weddings is just like mind-blowing to me. Like I just think of all the different elements, and that's why I'm always like, okay, go talk to Lucy. She'll know.
Well, and you're right. It's so hard. Like, that was also one of the things I thought about with rented gatherings and going to the package decor model was that people want my aesthetic to some degree. Um, and I can't be everywhere at once. And not everyone can afford to hire me to design their wedding, which is one of our Lucy Myers events services. So
Hmm.
rented gatherings was designed to be something that I wouldn't necessarily need to fulfill. It would be something that my staff were able to also work with couples to put together, their quotes and things like that. And something that is just a little bit more financially approachable because there isn't that price tag of like a custom design being attached to it. But exactly that just, it's hard when you are your business because at the end of the day you're selling your time and there's only so much of that, and there's only, as our lives progress, exactly what you were saying before, it's hard to book far out because you don't know what you're doing. So I'm not married, you're not married, we don't have children.
Hmm.
We're of the age where we might start thinking about those things. And
Yeah.
if we're booked 2 years down the road with weddings, then it's really tricky to know what anyone's situation will be. And I think COVID definitely amplified that. So, and with all the postponements and how few Saturdays there are, I've put a hold on booking for 2022 season,
Yeah.
other than full planning packages, because those clients, we need to start looking at vendor availability now, given that everyone is so overbooked right now. Those packages can be booked, but anything that's smaller, like a design or a month of package, I'm waiting until September to book anything for the 2022 season, so that if people do postpone, we have calendar availability for them, and so that I can kind of take a look at all of that. And because really we don't start those services until the next year anyway. So
Mhm.
um but yes, there does come a point where you just don't have enough of yourself to go around. And you have to figure out some sort of scalability for your business model in order to work around that. So
Well,
it can be a challenge.
and back to what you were saying at the beginning is that balance, right? Like I'm one of those people where I know I need people, like I need to talk to people. I know I'm a people type of person. I need to talk to people. And even that touch interaction, like literally our job is we're pampering people all day, right? So it's so funny stepping away from it with COVID and just the way the world has been. It really makes you realize why you're doing what you're doing. It kind of brings you back to your why of like why we're entrepreneurs, why we've created these businesses. But you were like, how old were you when you started your business? Like you would have been like, well, like,
I was in my 20s.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. So
yeah.
trying to figure out like I think of all the different things like working weddings, like their weekends, right? So they take up a lot of your personal life. Even for us, like I remember when I had started the spa at 20, I was like, I'm missing out on all these parties or going out on Friday nights. And my friends probably all thought I was not social or whatever. But I just laugh because I'm like, but I got so many connections and I loved the atmosphere of being
Mhm.
like being a part of somebody's wedding. And a lot of our friends are all getting married too. So we've really been able to hone in on those really special occasions with friends too. It just kind of worked out. I never thought of that when I first got into the industry as like, I'm going to be at that perfect stage when my friends start to get married and really getting to pamper them on their special days and being able to just be a friend as well as their makeup artist on their day, which I think makes people feel so much more comfortable knowing the people they're working with.
No, that okay. So you touched on a lot of things I wanna respond to. So one is that yes, having a makeup artist as your friend, I don't personally have any immediate friends that are makeup artists, but that seems to me like the real win
Yeah.
because there's nothing worse than having your makeup done professionally and they filled in your eyebrows different than you would, and now you just feel weird. And I was just talking recently with friends about I remember the first time I was a bridesmaid, I got my hair and makeup done and I didn't love it. And I looked at my friends and they all looked great. I was like, oh, I love your makeup. And they were all like, really? And I hated mine and my hair. I was the only one that wore my hair down, even though we all were long haired brunettes. And when the photographer took the photos, the wind, I had like this sort of vintage to the side thing. The wind was coming the wrong direction. So it was just blowing hair in my face. It was so frustrating. So I learned my lesson. So when I was a bridesmaid again, I was like, you know what? I'll get my hair done, but I'm just going to do my own makeup. And I looked at my friend Kendall, and she looked so great. And I was like, ah, this would have been the makeup artist. I should have just done the makeup. But then I feel like I probably, if I had, I would have been doing what she was doing. Mind you, she doesn't wear a lot of makeup. She's
Mhm.
stunning naturally. She was going like, really? She was like, I feel like it's hard for people when your makeup has been done and it's different than what you're used to, that you become self-conscious about it. And so having someone that you trust do your makeup, such as yourself, and especially when you have either a long-time client who's getting married or a friend who's getting married, so much better because there's that flexibility where you have a little bit more of an opportunity when you're friends to do trials that aren't necessarily full on appointments. Maybe
Yeah,
you're just going somewhere for the night or something, and you can kind of play around with it more. And you would have such a better sense of what they wear on the daily basis that they would feel so much more comfortable.
that's one of the first questions I ask people. I'm like, what do you wear day to day? Because
Yeah.
like for me, I'm like, there's so many things I know personally I do on my makeup, even if I'm just running out to the grocery store, there's things that I will do and I just do them. But then somebody might be the absolute opposite. So,
Yeah.
and almost showing them, I'm always like, okay, show me pictures of what you want done and show me pictures of what you wear day to day.
Yeah. So
And
you can
people,
find the hybrid. Well,
yeah,
and sometimes it's like, you might see someone in a magazine or online that has like a stunning smoky eye, but that doesn't actually look great on everyone based on like the shape of your eye. I'm not going to pretend I know about makeup, but
no, you're doing good. You're good.
that not everyone looks great in everything. And so I feel like having, again, the expertise and someone who really, like yourself, like you're saying, like really cares about making it feel like you on the day.
Mhm.
You just want to make someone look and more importantly feel their best on the day. You want it to still be them. You want them to shine through. So I'm sure it's always a balance because I think that people would come in with some sort of real glamour look that doesn't necessarily translate to their day. And in that same thing, I find even with like wedding dresses, as much as it's fun to pick a dress that you just love, and sometimes that's the best choice, it's also good to think about where you are. And being that we do Muskoka weddings, do you want to wear a huge ball gown, traipsing around your cottage property, dragging leaves in your train to take photos? Like maybe that isn't the best fit given the style and location of the wedding.
Mhm.
So I think just like beauty, you kind of need to think about your entire look and what makes the most sense for who you are in your personal style, the logistics of, functionality on the day based on your wedding plans. There's lots to consider.
And making it timeless. I love that like timeless piece because you're tying in your like decor, your flowers, your bridesmaids dresses. You're trying to tie everything in and to make it all work together. Like you wouldn't like I just there's we could talk about this forever. Like there's just so many things that could like tie in that just need to flow within that
Yeah.
specific day.
Oh, definitely. The cohesiveness of the wedding starts with your save the date, I think.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where we all like to joke about like 80s dresses, and you see even in Friends, like the show.
Yeah.
I'm a Friends generation, and so even like just the dresses with the shoulders and all of the bows and all this stuff, it kind of makes you like, we look back and laugh at those styles, but how are we going to feel in 20 or 40 years when we look back on the stuff that we wear now, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that having something that's timeless and elegant and flattering to your body and complementary to your personal taste is really something that feels like you is the best choice versus going for like a big trend or something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, the Pinterest world, there's like endless opportunities of different things you can bring in. And even with like Etsy and different customizations, you can really bring in specific things that are you. And whether it comes to like you were saying, your train, your jewelry, the pieces on your bouquet, like there's just so many things you can offer. So where can people find you, Lucy? What is the best way for people to reach out to you to learn more about your business, or if they want to get a hold of you to book some events?
Oh, yes. So the best way to reach us is to go to our websites, lucymyersevents.com or rentedgatherings.com, and submit an inquiry. I'm a little bit old fashioned, so I prefer an email because it gives me an opportunity to send over more information right away. And there's lots of information on the websites as well.
Well, thank you so much, Lucy. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, hun. Take
Okay.
care. Bye.